Number 1, using a while loop, write code that is equivalent to this. I'm just going to copy and paste that because I like typing as little as possible. And basically a while loop is just like a for loop, except for you don't have this first statement, so we got to stick that there. And you don't have this last statement, so we got to stick that there. And that needs a semicolon. And there you go, except there's a bug. What's the bug that I've just made? I don't have braces, so this is the only line that will be repeated. If I add braces, now both lines will be repeated, and voila, this code is the same as the for loop above. Any questions? I thought I heard a yes, but I didn't hear a question.
Why did you do the increment after the print?
Why did I do the increment right here?
Yeah.
Okay, as opposed to putting it right there.
Yeah.
Okay. Technically, both of them would do the loop 100 times. So either one is a loop. There is a subtle difference. Notice that I'm printing I. If I increment it before I print it, then I'll be counting from 1 to 100. Whereas if I print it before I increment it, then the numbers that will be printed out will actually go from 0 to 99. So the question is, which do you want? It's not that one of them is right, except that the question says, write code that is equivalent to this. And in this particular code, this actually counts from 0 to 99. The reason we know it does that is because, well, because I'm telling you and I know it does that. One way we could test it is pasting it into our code and compile it and run it and see. And here's the reason is this I++ in a for loop is the last thing executed. It's as if that were put at the very end of the loop. So to be equivalent, we do the same.
Can you go through the steps of a for loop?
Yes. I don't know what the steps of a for loop are. Can you clarify?
I'm saying you have the, whatever, the initializer, the checker, I know that's not what it's called, but whatever.
Yeah.
You check it, and then you do it, and then you...
Okay. So I'm going to pretend I'm a computer and step through how I interpret this code. Okay. My finger represents the instruction pointer, so it's pointing along as I do instructions until I reach this for loop. As soon as I see that, I see the for loop has 3 parameters, and I'm going to first execute the first one. I is equal to 0. So, well, int I declare an I, equals 0. That's actually a different operation to the computer. And so I initialize that I to be a 0. Then, after I've done that first command, which precedes the for loop, then I start doing the content. And I'm going to do it as long as I is less than 100. So first thing I check is I less than 100? By first thing, I mean next thing. Is I less than 100? If so, then I execute everything, which is just this one line. And I'm going to print I, so it's going to print as 0, because I is still a 0. Okay? Now I've reached the end of my looping region. I'm sure there's a proper name for that, I just can't remember what it is.
Okay.
I apologize. At the end, we're going to execute this last command, I++, so now I becomes a 1. And now we ask the question, is I less than 100? Mm-hmm. Yes, it is, so we do it again. We print I, we print the number 1, we increment it, and now we go back to the top and repeat. Is 1 less than 100? Yes, so we print it, we increment it, now it's a 2. Is 2 less than 100? Yes, so on and so forth. We print a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, a 7, 8, all the way up to 98. We print the number 98, then we increment it, now it's a 99. Is 99 less than 100? Yes, we print 99, we increment it, now it's 100. Is 100 less than 100? No, so we no longer do what is between the braces, or what the for loop loops over. So now we jump beyond the for loop and start executing the next instruction and keep going. Okay, did I do what you had asked? Okay, yes.
Are there advantages and disadvantages, or where would you want to use a while versus a for, or is there any personal preference, or is there, do they have like preferred uses?
Okay. I think it is mostly a matter of preference. People will use whatever's convenient. Most programmers like being succinct. So I kind of think for loops are preferred over while loops when you need to initialize something and have a condition and have to increment your iterator, which is most of the time. So for loop is pretty much that's your multi-tool agent that you're going to use all the time. A while loop is for those cases where you don't want to do it exactly like a for loop, I guess. Yeah, essentially never use a while loop unless it seems right. Now there certainly are cases where, I'll give you an example. Let's suppose I have two numbers, j equals 1, and I want I to increment by 1 and j to double every single time. And I'm going to print I and j. Now, and maybe I'm going to iterate while j is less than 100 or I is more than 32 or something. I don't know. That doesn't even make sense. But now it's starting to get kind of complicated, and there are actually ways to do this with a for loop. Turns out you can use commas to put multiple commands inside the parameters. Don't do that. It's just getting confusing. At this point, I'm going to switch to a while loop because it gives me the chance to be more explicit and state everything that's going on, and kind of overwhelming the utility of a for loop, in my opinion. So I guess that's a good case for a while loop. Short answer to your question is just use a for loop. It's usually the right tool for the job. Yes, so let me talk about that. In fact, this is one of those things that's probably easier to explain by example than to even describe. J times equals 2 is the same thing as j equals j times 2. It's just a shorthand way of writing it. You can say j plus equals 9 is the same thing as saying j equals j plus 9. You can say j divide equals 31 is the same thing as saying j equals j divided by 31. In my opinion, I think it's bad that there are multiple ways to express the same thing, because then people do it both ways and then code gets harder to read. But this was designed to make the programmer's life easier and the writer's life easier and the reader's life harder. There's a trade-off there. Basically, you can save keystrokes by using this notation instead of that approach. Both are equally valid, and I'm sorry that there are multiple ways to do it.
I've never seen that function before, because it's kind of like the less than or equal to situation. So I was thinking that they were similar.
Yeah, people actually get into weird things. You can actually do something like I less than, or shift left equals 2. 2 less than is actually shifts the number to the left, which is equivalent to dividing it by 2. 3. So this will actually multiply I by 8, which is probably the most confusing way you could ever possibly write it. And your goal is not to be confusing. Your goal is to be clear. So just do this. I times equals 8, or even better, I equals I times 8. And yeah, there's all kinds of things. J, let's see, ampersand equals x plus plus, parentheses equals 3. And what this is going to do is it's going to take j, it's going to bitwise AND it with what x was before it was incremented, and increment the x, and then the whole thing will resolve to whether or not the result of that is equivalent to the number 3. And programmers like to write weird expressions like that if they want their code to be utterly unreadable, which is something you should never do.
But they understand it.
Well, yeah, but even any human being has to sit there and think about it for a while. So
Some coders don't want other people to know, so
that's true. If you're sticking it on the web because it's a web-based program and you'd rather the world didn't have it, then why are you sticking it on the web? But then again, you know, there are all kinds of reasons to obfuscate. And people do. I wish they wouldn't. I'm more of an open source type guy, so I think everything should be clear and simple. Long story short, that's something you can do, and you probably shouldn't be doing it. There you go. Okay. Any other questions on number 1? Okay. Is it usually better to put all of your code in one method or break it up into smaller methods? Yeah, I mean, would you rather live in a place where all your stuff is on the floor or where it's neatly organized into cabinets? Okay, this is not really a very hard question. I didn't think anybody would get it wrong, but it's one of those things I just put up there to make the point. You would be surprised how many people start coding and the first thing they do is they make a main function that's this long. And in fact, that's what we did for the last 2 days, and it was kind of a bad example. We need to start breaking things up into small methods, and then the code gets a lot easier to manage. If you had debugged one of your functions really well, and you've been using it for 2 years, and you know it's rock solid and it works really well, and then you write a little more code over here, and the whole program doesn't work, where do you think the bug is? It's in the new part, right? The old part's already well debugged. By contrast, if you put everything in one big function, and then you change that function to make your new program, where's the bug? Exactly, who knows? It could be anywhere. So keep things separated and organized. As a general rule, I say no function should ever be bigger than you can fit on a page at one time in your text editor. That's a pretty vague, fuzzy rule, and I break it all the time, but it's not a bad thing to keep in mind.